Okay.
Good morning. Welcome to our Friday session. Yes, we made it to Friday for the Spring Sessions 2026 for the Cambridge Power Platform User Group. And today's a really special one. Today is a discussion about women in tech that I'm really looking forward to. So just to kind of give you a bit of introduction. So I'm Sharon Sumner. I'm the leader of the Cambridge Power Platform User Group, although there's not just me here, there's plenty of people in the background. I am the CEO of Business Cloud Integration and also Microsoft Regional Director and Microsoft MVP, which I've been part of for about 6 or 7 years. In the background, we also have Sancho, who I'm not sure, yeah, he is here today, who is our co-leader and also a moderator there in the background. Say hi, Sancho.
Hi, everyone.
We've got Luke, who is doing all the technical mastering and is also moderating anybody in chat.
Hey, folks.
And the lovely Amber Turner Smart, who has pulled all of this together for us like magic.
Happy Friday, guys.
So with those people in the background, we are perfectly set for, please add anything to chat that you'd like us to talk about, or challenges. We do like a good challenge. And if there's anything that you want to add to the conversation, if we have the ability to take you off mute, then we'll certainly look at doing that too. Just as part of that, then, it's really important that we are all nice to each other. We have some rules of engagement, and it literally is just behave, be nice, be respectful, especially in discussions like this where it sometimes can get a little bit heated, although less so these days, I think. We're all quite respectful of each other, and we don't very often see bad behavior. So let's just carry that on today, please. So today's session is the final session of a week of events that we've had. So we've seen the AI in Action roundtable panel discussion, actually, that we had on Monday, which was a fantastic discussion, actually. Really brought up some good enterprise questions and how businesses are adopting AI, especially through the Power Platform. We've looked at user-defined functions with the lovely Clarissa, who's with us again today, which was a really nice deep dive technical session. Lots of good feedback on that one. We had a really long extended session with Leslie on adoption, which hopefully those of you who are watching it on YouTube later will watch in sections, take regular breaks, because she covers so much ground in that session. We also have the Douglas Romeo session about using Claude across Power Platform. All of these now available, well, not now, shortly available on YouTube for you to watch back at your leisure in a room with aircon and a nice cold drink, because the weather we're having this week is punishing. So we're going to round off the week with an hour's conversation with two lovely ladies in tech, just to talk about where we're at in the conversation around women in tech. And I know it's very close, certainly to Zoe's heart. And Clarissa, we are part of the movement. So it's all very interesting to discuss where we feel like it's at and where it's actually at. That's what we're going to be covering today. Again, those of us involved, hopefully you all know me by now, but if you don't, reach out on LinkedIn and the social stuff and get in touch, and we'll have a virtual coffee. But basically, I'm SharePoint Sharon, as they call me. I come from SharePoint through Power Platform and anything business process automation. So I'm a great specialist in getting to value faster, understanding and leveraging the tool set within the Power Platform and the bigger M365 range. Also with us today is Clarissa. Clarissa is actually one of my team, I'm very proud to say, over at Z0. Clarissa, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, for myself, I've been working in Power Platform since 2019, I think. I should probably actually remember that number, but I specialize particularly in Canvas applications. I really like making really intuitive user interfaces and all that kind of area of design and just pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Canvas apps, both on an aesthetic and a functional perspective. So I really like that kind of challenge of having the limitations and seeing how far you can push the technology. And that's kind of where I specialize and where I sit.
Real techie, love it. And last but definitely not least, the lovely Zoe, who I've known for some years now in the MVP and regional director world. But Zoe, tell us about you.
So I've worked in tech for, gosh, this makes me feel old, more than 20 years now, primarily in the modern work or end user space, but more recently working across that full AI business solutions stack. I've also been in leadership roles for about a decade now, I think, as well. So really kind of sitting at that intersection of tech and leadership. And for the purposes of this discussion today, I think that kind of where those two things meet is definitely a problem for female talent.
I agree.
I have to say, Sharon, I also didn't realise until we did the session on Monday that you were SharePoint Sharon, because I also came up through SharePoint and my Twitter handle is still SharePoint Zoe as well.
I think I'm one of 3 SharePoint Sharons. I think it's Sharon Weaver as well. Yeah, I definitely think there are 3 of us that are known as SharePoint Sharon. But yeah, SharePoint is a really good grounding, right, for technology. I absolutely adore it. I do stickers that say I heart SharePoint, which I know not many people will confess to, but I do love it. Okay, so for the topics today, and yes, sorry, this recording will also be on YouTube later, so that you can watch it over again, pause us and rant when you disagree. But we'd rather you were here and being part of the conversation. So yes, do join us on YouTube, which will go live shortly after the event. So let's jump in. And I know that Zoe, you've been an advocate for women. Certainly, you're very prolific on the speaker front and making sure that events are well balanced, which is where I see you're shouting out a lot on YouTube. And I think not YouTube, LinkedIn. And I think the accountability for event organisers is massively top of mind now when they think about putting on an event. And I love, every time I see it, I think this is Zoe's work, because I think you have spent a lot of time kind of discussing and bringing that to the forefront. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think. So, well, if we go back to the pandemic, first of all, one of the things that happened during the pandemic that I thought was fantastic was we suddenly saw many more women speakers, because all of a sudden, when people were able to join events virtually, they didn't need to travel, they didn't need to sort out childcare or the million things that women are typically juggling. And we started to get a little bit more of a mix. And then what's happened since then is we've kind of had this pivot back into in-person events. And I've also started to see this trend, not so much with some of the events that we're involved in, but I have seen events that have had not a single woman on the lineup. And it's not just me. There's quite a few people who are willing to call out some of these organisers. And one of the common things that they say is that they don't actually know how to find female speakers, or no women applied, something like that. And I just think it's such a poor excuse when we have so many talented women in tech. And it's the responsibility of the organisers to try to do things in a different way. And when you look at some of these events that don't have women on the schedule, quite often they also don't have any women in the organising team either. So that diversity of thought and that ability to be able to attract more diverse attendees and speakers comes from the organising team.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's something that people focus on. And I don't know if it is an identity thing, because as we get more of the strong women in senior roles, that kind of takes away the excuse of we only wanted to have CX level presenters, right? So I think I'm hoping that it's changing. It feels like you're right. We had a definite like boost to the whole thing with COVID, or certainly with lockdown. The ability to work remotely, I think, has made more women leaders, has made more women speakers, and has made women way more confident in being able to project a brand and an image. I know we still see an awful lot of the main influencers, as I would call them, on LinkedIn, who are more about it's about the travel, and it's about going to all of the events in person. And every time I see that, I think that is great, and that is fantastic. I loved doing all of that, but at the same time, you need to be able to have the same influence without having that kind of necessary in-person presence. Clarissa,
I
what's your
think,
thought?
yeah, so I think is something that I don't know if it's just anecdotal. So maybe other people might not have this experience, but I mean, we've heard through plenty of kind of research that when it comes to like applying to jobs, women tend to only apply to jobs where they tick like every single box, whereas men are more likely to apply to things where they're like, I've got like 50%, 70% of this. And I don't know if that kind of mindset comes in as well when it comes to events. Like for me personally, I would be quite nervous about going to an organizer and saying, hey, I'm great, listen to what I have to say. I feel a lot more I guess in a safe kind of space where people can reach out to me and say, hey, look, we're interested in what you have to say. That makes it a lot easier, of like there's a lot lower barrier to entry, because I feel like I'm going to be welcomed there, and it's not immediately kind of putting myself in a potentially risky or vulnerable situation. I don't know if that like resonates with either of you as well.
I think, having been on both sides of being a speaker and an organizer of events, and I know you have too, Zoe, the difficulty is presenting the session information without the speaker information. And I was one of the, you vote for the sessions, kind of what you call them. But I was helping out with session choice on an event, and I forget which one it was. It was a couple of years ago now, where they did not tell you who submitted the session at all. You had no names, no gender, nothing. You just had the session description. It was brilliant, really brilliant. Took away all the pressure of, oh yes, I know that person, I ought to, I can imagine how that session would be. You have nothing, so you're starting from a blank sheet of paper. And I think that really does help with organizing an event that is about the content, not about the personalities that are going to turn up, or making sure that you've got the social profile for the event. Was that when you were involved in, Zoe?
Yeah, so we do that at Scottish Summit. And so two things. First of all, some of the points you made, Clarissa, were exactly why me and Sarah Fenner started the new speaker workshop that we run a few years ago. And for me, one of the big motivations was, we're, again, coming out of the pandemic, we'd lost a lot of the local user groups, which is where a lot of the pipeline of new speakers typically would come through. So, and I was sick of seeing all the same people. I was sick of seeing mostly men. So when we set that up, one of the big drivers for me was trying to get more diversity, not just new speakers, but more diverse speakers as well. And one of the frustrating things in that is it's still mostly men that apply. We do get good diversity across race and ethnicity and things like that, but it's still mostly men that are coming to that. One of the things that we do in that workshop, though, is we help people figure out how to write a session abstract that's really clear in saying, this is what I'm going to talk about, this is why it matters, this is what the audience will take away. And we run them through that same blind session evaluation that we do at Scottish Summit to basically say, like, this is why it matters. Because if you've got an event organizer that's just looking at yours next to two others, you need to stand out. And even the amount of experienced speakers that are still putting in really low quality session abstracts is insane. But we only do blind session reviewing because we want to take all of that bias out, and we usually get a really good mix.
And it's worth actually just shouting out that Scottish Summit, I think, is pretty much the only event that I've been a part of where they actively encourage you to do a joint session or bring a new speaker, or introduce a new. It's brilliant that they are really pushing that, because you're right, we are getting the same people sometimes with the same session at all of the events. I mean, I know speakers do their sessions for the year, and you've sorted out what it is you're going to talk about for the year. It's great to have the topic and to have the angle, but the actual same session kind of doesn't work, especially when we went remote and everything is up on YouTube as well. You're like, I swear I've seen this before somewhere. So I think, again, like I say, complete props to the team at Scottish Summit. They seem to be pushing the boundaries more, I think, than other in-person events were doing. And I certainly took along a new speaker, and bless him, he wanted me to be on the stage with him, and I just kind of stood there at the podium. It's like there for confidence, which he did brilliantly well. And very, very proud of him. And I think it's important to have that support as either a new speaker or Clarissa. I think you make a fair point there that even if you feel like your topic is not as current or as interesting, you still might feel nervous that it's not the right tone or the right level or what people are wanting to hear right now. So I think that is important, to have support mechanisms within event organizers. Do we think people are just using AI to write their abstracts these days, to put their submissions in?
Hopefully not.
Yeah, I'd say they probably are, though. Having just gone through the process of reviewing for Scottish Summit a few weeks ago, I think there were some sessions where they should perhaps have used AI, where we had like a one sentence description of what they were going to talk about. And then others where, it was clearly AI. And the issue with that is that there's no way of knowing whether the person actually knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, and while that might even the playing field, if you like, so all sessions will look equal, how do you know whether that's going to come across or whether you've just submitted a good abstract? Can you follow through with that in session? It's always a bit of a risk, and I think it's a risk event organisers take anyway. So I think, in terms of speaking, there has always been this confidence issue for women, hasn't there? In that not only are you, stepping up in a public speaking kind of role, but you're also talking about tech and wanting people to listen. And that's part of the challenge. Are we given the same degree of attention? Because, we're just women. I can't believe I said that.
The air quotes were implied.
It's I'm not saying that part of the issue, I think it's dual. Firstly, you don't expect to see women at events, therefore organisers don't put as many women in events, right? I think we're past that. I think that's a historical issue. The second is women having the confidence to put themselves forward, right? And I think that's been the bigger challenge that the remote working world has helped us with, because we're on camera all the time, right? Because we're doing Teams meetings, etc. I think we're all just a lot more used to it. And I still do, though, meet women who have enjoyed being in the technology sphere, but don't feel like they've got either the rewards from it, or don't feel like they've got the energy anymore, because it requires extra energy to kind of compete. Does that make sense? Have you come across any of that?
Yeah, so I think particularly as women get older, and I'll share some of the stuff I've been dealing with this year. So I went to Cloud Tech Tallinn in January, and while I was there, my mum called me to say that she'd been diagnosed with lung cancer, and she's got the all clear now. It was caught very early, so it was the best possible outcome. But I made the decision at that point that I wouldn't be traveling. I told work, I said, I'm not traveling for business until she's better. My dad's also got some health issues going on. So even though my mum's back at work, there's still this pressure. And I don't live close to my parents. I'm a 90-minute drive away from them, working in a global role, in an incredibly demanding position with a lot of responsibility. in an industry that is just changing continuously. So it's not even about just the energy that you need to go to events. You know, and I'm lucky in the sense that I don't have children. It was a choice not to have them. So it's not like I'm not being squeezed by the parental care and having to drop things and drive up to Leeds and, you know, take my parents to hospital and things like that, and having to juggle childcare. But a lot of women are. And, you know, by the time they get into their like 40s, 50s, there's often this squeeze of family responsibilities at home, of parental care or elderly relatives who are needing care. A very demanding job. And, you know, even just from my perspective, like my next in-person event is Scottish Summit in October, which I'm the organizer for, and that's it. You know, I made a conscious decision not to travel because I just don't have the bandwidth or the energy. And then when you throw in perimenopause and things like that on top, it just creates this additional pressure that women have to deal with that some men do, but often it falls to the women to juggle all of it.
Yeah, I do agree. And it's not necessarily just children, although Clarissa, you're far too young to be having this conversation. It's also about your life choices, right? So we have, you know, some people who got ill during COVID or are living with partners that have got illness. It is difficult to still have that same availability to go out into the world and, you know, put on the smiling face and get up on the stage. It takes an awful lot. So I think for me, that's why I've continued to be remote for events. So we haven't gone back to, and I've actually moved out of Cambridge. Hotel. Most of the team are still back there, hence we've left the name. But a local user group or a user group doesn't need the identity of a local building, I don't think. And which is why I've carried on with the virtual stuff, because it allows so many more attendees. I mean, we got sessions from, you know, women speakers across the world in some of our Women in Tech events that we've put on through the Cambridge Power Platform User Group. And we've had some great guys too in other events, but specifically in the Women in Tech events, you will get more speakers that you would never be able to reach by keeping doing the remote thing. So I think certainly the remote thing helps to address those things where you've got personal pressures and, you know, whatever they are, doesn't matter whether it is children at your feet or pets or sick relatives. We all have those outside of the work pressure. And I think it's also about how much you give to your role as well, isn't it? I think we are certainly, all the women in tech that I've ever met, very dedicated to what it is that they're doing, whether that's as a leadership trajectory, which is a lot of pressure, or whether that is keeping up with the tech like you do, Clarissa, which is a lot of learning and a lot of constant. It's very, very time consuming to stay up to date with will this work, won't this work. Clarissa did a demo this week on here where, you know, you must have spent hours playing with the options and the ways around to do those solutions to then come up with something that was worth presenting and cutting the time for everybody else, right?
Not quite as long as you would think, actually, just because I use these things all the time now. I love them so much. So, but yeah, like it's, you know, coming up with, you know, how to distill all of the things that I've learned in, as you say, the multiple hours that it takes to actually get familiar with this and then try and distill that information into something. Yeah, it does take, it's non-trivial.
And I think, Zoe, we've seen a better balance coming from leadership organisations like Microsoft with the MVP program. It is getting much better, I think, at the balance between women advocates and also in the regional director program as well. I've got to say, I'm absolutely astounded by the quality of some of the women in the regional director program. These are people I'm so pleased that I've met in my lifetime. They are real entrepreneurs, or, so commercially minded. It's an absolute pleasure to spend time with them. My favorite day of the year is RD Day at MVP Summit. It's so good, simply because you're surrounded by a very high quality of commercial individuals, men and women. But it's so nice to see that there is such a good balance. I mean, I think if I were to look back at you weren't there this year, unfortunately, but if I were to look back at the photos this year and last year, we're still not at 50%, right? But there are some significant women in those groups, which is really great to see.
It's certainly come a long way over the last few years. I do have to say the quality of the people in the RD program is so high that I still feel imposter syndrome.
Yeah, they are so good. And I think in terms of female speakers, we've got, and let's face it, you don't have to, we're talking about sharing your knowledge and being visual. You don't have to be visual to enjoy being a woman in tech. And I think there's an awful lot of women who have benefited from those of us that are out there sort of making a bit more noise, from a confidence level to be able to go into the field even. And I think I'm just going to see if have I got any stats on my little cheat sheet. Let's see. So I asked 2 different AIs about women in tech, and I got some very different numbers, because one is convinced that we're practically at parity in terms of pay scale. Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. And I've seen actual studies that tell me completely differently. But the AIs are today certainly very optimistic that women are doing extremely well and are considered very equally with their peers. I mean, I haven't, because I run my own businesses, I haven't interviewed for higher positions. You have, Zoe. What's that like?
So I've been in my current role for a little under a year, and I've been making changes to the team and hiring, and I've currently got a 50-50 split of men and women, which I'm super proud of. I think the prior team was all male, and I've got a good mix of other diversity perspectives as well, with people coming from different backgrounds. And I think it's so important to have that diverse team. It was really difficult. One of the women who came into one of the roles, I think she was actually the only female candidate, and it was someone I've worked with before, so she'd literally messaged me on LinkedIn to say that her role had been eliminated. Was I aware of anything? And I was like, quick, get your application into this role. So that was more by luck than by design, for sure. I've got one more vacancy. I've been trying to fill it with a woman, and again, with the exception of one candidate, everybody who's applied for it is men. And these are relatively senior positions. So, I do think when I look at kind of the entry level, the lower levels in the organisation, I think at that point we're starting to get a really, really good mix. And a lot of the challenges that we will have had when we were younger, I don't think the younger generations are facing them in the same way. The issue is when women start to get into kind of management roles or roles with more responsibility. And it comes back to what you were saying earlier, Clarissa, about the fact that women often won't go for something unless they tick every box. And from a leadership perspective, when a leader is supporting women through career development, particularly in big corporate organizations where things are kind of structured in terms of bands and grading, and there are formal promotion processes and things like that, women typically need to be pushed a little bit to progress at the same speed as the men that they work with. And what this means, I mean, there's a term for it. They call it the missing rung, where women have a missing rung at the bottom of the ladder into leadership. And that's the problem, where we start off with a really good, diverse, balanced mix, and it's not translated.
Filtered. Yeah, as you go up. I think that's interesting, because I think that in order for organizations to kind of encourage more women into leadership, you do need to be a bit more proactive. I don't think that the waiting for people to ask is the right way forward. It should be recognizing what everyone's doing. And I think this is what makes good leaders anyway, is when you're recognizing what your team are doing. You're not waiting for people to shout about what they're doing, and then being able to pick up, whether it's men or women, who is actually displaying good leadership, like kind of techniques or skills and capabilities within their current role. Who could you nurture, who is got those talents that you can start to elevate, and think about it like that more proactively than just, oh, I'm just going to shove out a job description and tell people, hey, there's an opening and hope.
Yeah, no, I think it's really difficult, to the degree that some of my best hires have been ones that I've gone out and proactively. How many years did I chase you, Clarissa? It's quite a while. Clarissa online until she agreed to work for me. No, but it's not that, that's men and women, right? So Sancho, I believe I saw at an event, met at an event, and thought, this guy's one of us. Eventually he'll come and work for me, and kept in touch until he also agreed. Veronique Langell, absolutely exceptional woman in tech, and the moment she put a post out saying that she'd been made redundant, I swoop. Because you're always looking for a certain type of person that's going to fit within your team. And I do think it is a shame, though, that we don't, like you say, there's no visibility of some of the people that would be really good for those roles. And it's probably down to lack of belief or lack of pushing themselves forward. But I always say, people either deserve a role or can prove that they're good at a role. You don't just get a role because you've decided that's your title and that's what you're going to put yourself in for. So it's always interesting I think, in the interview process, that there are so many people that deserve the next level up, but have never pushed themselves far enough. And that goes for both women and men. But it seems to, I don't know, to me, I see all of this rhetoric about the entitled generation, but I still see this when you're interviewing, that people don't have the confidence to know how good they are, especially in tech roles, which I find absolutely fascinating, because we don't have, it's very different when you're looking at sales roles, because you almost want the bravado, right? But in a purely technical role, you want somebody who is who can evidence what it is that they're saying, who understands the technology. I mean, Zoe, you probably don't write Power Apps anymore or anything, right? But you know how it all comes together. You've kept up with the technology, right, at the top layer of it. Because you have to be able to talk about those things. Clarissa, on the other hand, she just gets straight into the weeds with you, and will go right into how the solution is designed, and loves getting in there and all that messy code. They're different types of conversations, and straight away that you're having a different type of conversation. But I think, are we seeing enough women push themselves forward? Is it, yeah. So how do we go about giving women the confidence to do that?
So I know we've talked a little bit about speaking already, but it's one of the big reasons why I try to, like, anybody that I mentor at work, I try to encourage them into public speaking. And when I'm trying to sell them on the benefits of it, there's a few different reasons that I give them. First of all, that ability to be able to tell a story in a way that demonstrates you understand the problem, how to solve it, what lessons you've learned. It's a very powerful skill that will translate into your work, even if the work that you do is like a purely technical role. It helps with personal brand. So you start to become known for the thing that you're talking about, which can help with that career advancement. It gives you more confidence, it will start to get you noticed. And it will allow you to build a network, which means that if you're not progressing in your own organization, you've actually got this network that will allow you to move elsewhere as well. And, there's a lot of people, particularly early in their career, who think that they haven't yet earned their stripes. You know, they're not experienced enough to actually be on stage talking about things. But every single person has their unique perspective, their unique problems. You know, they might have delivered a project for a client and they came up against a problem, and the way that they tell that and the way that they share the outcome and what they learned will help someone. It will help someone else. You don't need to be the most experienced or the most technically capable, as long as you can tell the story in a way that is engaging and that is giving value to the audience.
I got a brilliant tip on that when I first started doing YouTube sessions, when I was first MVP and sharing knowledge in that way. I'm like, well, who wants to see yet another session on approval workflows? Well, actually, it's not about that at all. It's about if you can get somebody else to understand the technology by the way that you've presented it, your very own unique way, exactly as you're saying there. The fact that you were able to teach somebody that watched 3 or 4 other videos, but they got it when you spoke, because I can relate to that. There are teachers that I had when I was at school. You know, there are things that I've watched on YouTube and Microsoft events where I think this is a really interesting topic, but I'm sort of not getting it from this speaker. And you pivot, you go to somebody else, and you'll hear it. And I'm not saying that I only listen to women speakers, because I really don't. I listen to a lot of speakers and a lot of content, but it does help, I think, people to be able to express themselves, and therefore that's gonna translate into your career, isn't it? Because you can push yourself forward internally. And Clarissa, you've done quite a few speaking engagements, haven't you? You're an alum now, aren't you? You were an MP, and then you got distracted.
Yeah, no, I think for me, I think it's really important to gain those skills with communication, just the confidence with communication, because when you're explaining something to a group of people in like a user group, for example, you might have to be explaining that exact same concept to a client like later down the line, and being able to communicate. And I think this is where, like, especially in the age now where, you know, we're pushing so much with the AI stuff for the actual development to be more automated, I think the soft skills are going to become more and more important. You know, that ability to communicate, that ability to tell the story, that ability to, you know, empathize with the client or the customer, whoever you're talking to, and make sure that the way that you're presenting meets your audience and matches and can teach them specifically. So those soft skills are becoming more and more important. And what I find interesting is that those soft skills are things that are traditionally more associated with women. When we think of, you know, you know, that stereotype of, oh, well, you know, the women are good at empathizing, they can handle the communication, they can handle the like visual design, and then we'll get, you know, the men to do the tricky stuff. Obviously, those are unhelpful stereotypes, but in this case, where, you know, those soft skills that are more associated with women are becoming more and more valuable, I hope that that will actually help kind of promote women in tech and make them feel a bit more, I guess, valued, because it's the things that come naturally to us that are becoming more and more important.
And I think probably, Zoe, you touched on it earlier. The thing that we need there is diversity, right? And we're not saying, you know, girls rule the world. Maybe they do. But a good blend gives everybody a way better experience, right? There are things that guys are naturally good at, girls are naturally good at, and, you know, somewhere in the middle, loads of people are naturally good at a blend of all of those things. What we're saying is it's not that that we want 60% women at every event, which just equal is fine, right? or at least attempting to get an equal balance, not just taking the submissions as they come and ignoring the fact that, you have the ability to have at least a 30, 40, 50% female speaker contingent in an event. Same in a workforce, same in a work team, same in a, in a boardroom, right?
Yeah.
Because the only way that we get, and I find this massively in my career, the only way that we get a good conversation going is if we've got lots of different ways of looking at things. I mean, if everybody had the same outlook and the same opinions, well, everything would just be the same, wouldn't it? So I think that's what we bring to the table. We mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
why would you cut yourself off from half of the experiences of the entire world? Like, that's not a good business decision.
I do think the area that we're still struggling with, and maybe AI will help with this, is the women founders, right? The access to funding for women founders, and perhaps this is more important to me being one, it's criminal. Absolutely diabolical. I mean, you're talking like 3% of women founders get funded. It's a very, very low number. And I get the whole having been through the process of doing an exit. I get that people buy the founder, but when you're in those early stages and you're looking for finance or you're looking for an investor, you barely know where you're at yourself, right? Unless you're an experienced founder that's going again, or entrepreneur as they like to call us. Don't like that term. But if you've got that propensity to own a subject, to know what you're doing, you probably don't need the funding, right? The fact is that it is the lesser experience that require the help. So I think we're only going to solve that one when we've got women the other side of the table. So when the funders are experienced women and philanthropists, and I just don't see enough coming through in that way. It's like all well and good, but when we get there, we stop helping others.
Yeah.
We've got to get more encouragement for people that have succeeded to come back and help that come back around again.
Yeah, I think the same's true in the corporate world as it is in the founder world as well, where not all women in senior leadership roles, but having worked in a few big organizations, I've definitely seen some women who are probably a bit older, and they at the point when they climbed the ladder, there were even less of us in those organizations. So the way that they kind of adapted and felt they had to behave to be able to get ahead was like men, rather than authentically that authentic female leadership where we're leading with heart and empathy and all of the things that actually make us really good at it. And there's a tendency with some of these women who've kind of acted in that way and got to the top to pull the drawbridge closed behind them, instead of the way I try to do this is like pull as many people along, or as many women along with me as possible, because there's space for all of us. There is space for all of us at the top. And I think it's the same on the founder side as well.
Yeah, I mean, being a founder is an incredibly lonely place, right? And less so these days because more people are willing to talk about what that experience is like. And I think we're hopefully getting into the next generation of, maybe they're not AI founders, but they're able to access far more research than we were back in my day. When I first started businesses when I was very young, there was very little information. You sort of had to rely on things like your Chamber of Commerce. Whereas now you can just have a really productive conversation with Claude about, how do I go about this? What does the process even look like? So you're far more informed. And I think we saw that somewhere in the middle with the whole rise of Google as well, in terms of search. So these things only empower those. It will just be interesting to see if it empowers equally.
Yeah. I mean, one of the concerns I have just for AI more broadly is we don't have enough women working in the AI space. I think I was having a look at the numbers earlier, and I think it was around 22 to 25% of women working of people working in AI are women. And when you look at leadership roles, it's less. It's about 14-15%. So tech as a whole is ahead of that. AI obviously is lagging a little bit. But it's so important that women have a seat at the table for this, because the systems that we're building, this AI technology, is going to be driving so many things across society. Everything from how citizens access government services, decisions in healthcare, all kinds of things where potential bias in the system could actually worsen equality, not just for women, but again, across many of the different diversity perspectives that you might look at.
Clarissa, what are your thoughts on the AI stuff?
It's interesting because it is, obviously it's moving so fast, but it is scary. And I think it's important, a lot of the talk about AI online is only the kind of hype and stuff, but I think it's important to highlight the risks and make sure that everyone is being responsible with the way they use it, especially as you say, Zoe, if it's being used in these really important situations, where potential biases can be life-threatening, if we're talking about medical situations. So I think it's really important to be able to have voices around who are saying, like, either playing devil's advocate or saying, look, we really need to focus on the governance, the compliance. Obviously this is something that Microsoft have put out information about, but I don't feel like it's as at the top of the conversation as it should be, from my perspective. And I don't know as well if women feel that because they've had to work so hard to make sure that everything they do is 100% right, because when you're a woman in the conversation, you always feel like you're one mistake away from people going, see, yeah, she doesn't know what she's talking about.
So that we still feel like that. No.
Sorry?
It's so sad that we still feel like that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully many women don't feel like that, but I do feel like that's at least anecdotally in my experience from people I've spoken to and from my own experience, that is something that the fear of the mistake that proves them right is a potential barrier to using things like AI, where obviously mistakes can get through the cracks, and you have to be very vigilant to make sure that you're making sure that everything's right. And at some point you might think, well, why am I bothering? Why not just do it all myself? I trust myself. I don't know if that is a barrier that affects women, or maybe people from other backgrounds, maybe people who are neurodivergent, more than more than other groups.
Yeah, there's a study that came out within the last few months. I wish I had it to hand for the exact stats, but it was super interesting because it basically said that women are judged more harshly for being perceived as using AI day to day. So you could have a man and a woman who both use Copilot to help them produce a document. They both send it off. The man's seen as kind of being a go-getter, and the woman is like, oh, well, she's obviously not capable of doing it herself. And similarly for coding as well, female engineers using AI for coding tasks were again judged more harshly than men for the same.
Yeah, it's that different perception, isn't it? It's kind of similar to, I saw a study probably half a decade or a decade ago now, which was comparing like the way that people view men and women in leadership roles. And it was like, when the man is being affirmative and he's being strong, the woman is being bossy and nagging, and it's the same actions can be perceived very differently just by who is performing them. I think obviously with AI it's the same.
Yeah, so I had a real life example of that where again, working in a big company and having to follow the very structured promotion process, I was applying to be promoted to like associate director level at this point. And the thing that makes this worse is that the entire interview panel was female. And I didn't get it the first time I went for it. And I knew I was performing at the level. So I asked the HR person in the room if she'd sit down and give me feedback on what I needed to work on. And she said, well, you came across as too commercial and aggressive. And I said, I actually said to them, I said, if a man had been so passionate about what they do and cared so much and demonstrated commercial acumen, would you have judged him the same? And you could tell on a face you knew they'd messed up. But you know, the fact that even women have that unconscious bias to judge in that way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's learned from, you know, throughout all our media, everything. It's learned from a young age, and obviously nowadays, you know, we're at a point now with women in tech where, you know, everyone who's been coming up has been like more and more progressive as you know, time has gone on, and unfortunately, if we're looking at the generation that is about to come into the workforce, we've got like the rise of misogyny and stuff through, you know, a lot of social media pressures and influencers who are, you know, spouting very dangerous rhetoric. And I worry that, you know, things are going to be even harder when that generation hits for, you know, women in tech. And I feel like we've got to do as much as we can now to make like the fundamental changes to those, as you say, like those promotion pathways, the way that we treat leadership, the way that we enable people, so that when it's kind of like safeguarding our industry against this like potential threat, really.
Yeah, I mean, that is a threat in terms of just general teamwork, isn't it? If that's going to come through the organizations, that's quite worrying that we've made all this change just to have it undone. But, you know, I think women are quite resilient. Once we've got a foothold, I think we'll keep it. I don't think we've gone, from all of the stats and stuff that I've read, I don't think we've gone backwards in any way. We've always just pushed forwards. So I think we just got to find our new way of pushing forward. I think AI is thoroughly interesting in that the controls and stuff that we can put around it, we keep talking about humans and the protection of humans and stuff. That's not biased in that same way as other things that we've talked about in the past. It's just an interesting comparison as I think about it, that there aren't really, that I've been a part of or that I've heard, any particular judgments about women using AI. I still find it interesting though that when you do create some work, that there are still people that go, oh, look, definitely written by AI. I thought we were past that, you know, and I think we're getting past things at speed, like hallucinations we don't really talk about anymore because, you know, things got better. So I'm hoping that the technology will sort of outpace the ability to sort of stop and think about it and get it wrong. If that makes sense. That it will keep going at enough of a speed so that we can all leverage it, and at least keep moving forward, and not let it drive us backwards in any way. But obviously we're going to have to make sure that we're fully aware of that and taking control of that. Not sure what the point is.
Yeah, so I had my eyes opened a little bit last year, because when we talk about women in tech, we're obviously talking about kind of the tech industry or tech roles. When we talk about AI and the impact that this is going to have, it typically stays in that kind of enterprise or corporate or knowledge worker space. But I had a situation last year where I had 3 different women that I know, not through tech, through personal relationships, who don't work in kind of typical office type careers. So I've got one friend who is a makeup artist. She's very, very talented. She spent a couple of months last year flying with Robbie Williams on a private jet around Europe, doing his hair and makeup for all of the shows that he was doing. You know, so she and some of the stuff she's done has just been super, super cool. Not very tech literate. Lost her I think it was her Instagram account. I can't remember which way around it is. She lost either her Facebook was hacked or her Insta. And it was the one that was connected to a business page and had loads of personal memories of a friend who died as well. I had to spend 5 days like personally walking her through how to try to recover this back. Then there was another woman that I met who She's got like a small cleaning business, so she employs other people. Every single booking is managed by paper because she doesn't know how to do this with tech. And then the third one was another lady who her husband co-owns like an electrician's firm. She does all of the back office stuff, and she also lost access to one of her, like a Facebook account. And again, I had to do the same thing with her. What these three things showed me was, it's not just about AI leaving behind women or women being excluded or biased in the system, but actually, what about all of these other women who are in non-technical roles who they're not kind of part of this digital world today? Like, how big is this gap going to get?
But I don't think that's necessarily just women, though, is it? I mean, I've got some relatives that are so, it's not tech illiterate, but just not interested in tech the slightest. But you're going to get to a point, as we talk about digital currency, as we talk about identity, I'd rather not talk about that one. But all of these things are going to require the device, right? All of these things are about traceability and tracking and making sure you're at the right age to access the right services, etc. We're going to be in a situation where you can't cope without having said device. I walked into a shop the other day locally to the new area that I've moved in, and they're cash only, and I just didn't know what to do. Even to go to a cash point, it's just all done on your phone because you're so used to spending time in London or whatever, where it's just accepted that everything is digital. And so when you take a step into some of these communities, and I kind of went around the shops, and literally 60% of the shops in the local village only take cash.
Interesting.
There's this distrust of anything electronic, and I'm thinking, okay, we're having this kind of massive AI influx over here, and the rest of the world going back down to bartering over here. It's a really weird balance. So I think we have got some challenges ahead in terms of equality, but I don't think it's going to be the men-women thing. I think it is going to be, and largely it is about equitable share of finances, isn't it? So those with less are always going to have less access. How do we solve those issues? And do you know what? I would love to know when we stop talking about women in tech because we've nailed it, and we're dealing with another issue. And perhaps that's the lesson. Maybe we need to move on and solve some other problems, and then this problem will just solve itself as we do that. Perhaps we should do that.
Yeah, I'd like to think so.
Okay, I think that's probably quite a good way to close. We don't want to rule the world, we just want to fix it.
I can get on board with that.
So brilliant to talk to you both, and fantastic perspectives from, strong female leader, absolute technical goddess, and then me. So fantastic to speak to you both, and thank you so much for taking your time and coming and having a conversation with me. Maybe at some point we can do that in person, but we don't need to because technology lets us not do that. So thank you very much for your time this morning. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and look forward to seeing this on YouTube.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Clarissa. It was an absolute pleasure to be part of this week.
Thank you so much for taking the time out both ends of the week. And Clarissa, for your session earlier in the week. It's really important that we can share what we know, even if it helps one person. We've done our job.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the mindset to have. If you can just help one person, it's worth it.
Absolutely.
And I know that jump in, Sharon. There's a couple of questions for you guys in the chat.
Sorry.
Just to let you know, just before you go.
Okay, let's have a look. We have Duncan in the chat. I'm being dragged into work meetings, so I'll ask this now. How can allies best support women in tech without making it feel tokenistic? Oh dear. Yeah, I really get this. I'm an event organizer for the Norfolk Power Platform User Group and the East of England Power Platform Summit. We have women on our organizing committee and selection panel because they are excellent at what they do, not because we're trying to tick a box. Good man. At the same time, I do sometimes feel there is a pressure for events to be close to 50-50, and I'm conscious that I don't want to fall into the trap of asking someone to speak because they're a woman, rather than because their voice, experience and expertise would be genuinely add value. So my question is, from your perspective, what is the right way to invite, encourage, and support women to speak, apply, and get involved without making it feel like they are only being asked because they're a woman? That's one question. It goes on. Also, as an event organizer, what are the practical things we can do to make tech events more accessible and welcoming for women, not just in terms of speaker selection, but the whole experience? Things like how people are welcomed, how Q&A is handled, whether people feel safe networking, whether new speakers feel supported, how we deal with inappropriate behavior, and how we make sure women actually feel heard rather than just included on paper. I'd really value any advice on what makes an event feel safe, respectful, and genuinely inclusive from your perspective. I mean, Zoe, I think you've got the most experience in that. Any particular feedback?
I think a lot of it stems from the culture that you try to create within the event. So again, if I use Scottish Summit as the example, from day one, that has been one of the most inclusive and welcoming events. And a lot of it is driven by the way that Mark Christie and Ian Connolly, who were the original founders, a lot of it is driven by the way that they show up in the community. So making sure that you have that focus on inclusion, accessibility, and diversity almost as a core value in the way that you approach everything that you do. And then there's a lens that needs to be applied again to every activity. So things like even the pictures that you use on the website or the social media, are you including, have you just got pictures of men sat in the audience, or have you got kind of women on stage or women in the audience? Can they look at themselves and see them in that? With the session selection, I mean, I don't think that you should be asking someone to speak just because they are a woman. I don't think we need to. I think there are a huge amount of talented women across the industry, but making sure that your call for speakers is being published in places that maybe you've not thought of before, reaching out to women in tech groups and making them aware of it, doing the blind session reviewing so that it's not just mates of the organisers who are getting in or people that but actually making it so that filter is taken out and you're just looking at the session abstract. What we do after that, though, we also, once we've got the the ranking of the sessions, we then also look at it from a number of other measures with the speaker profile attached to make sure that we've got the right blend of known and unknown speakers, of experienced and new speakers, of men and women, and just making sure that you've got kind of these checks and balances in place. And if you're struggling, reach out to people across the community, reach out to women across the community who you think have got reach in this space as well, because there are lots of us that care about this, and we will help you find women. And I mean, the inappropriate behaviour one I think is super interesting, because I know quite a lot of women who've experienced this, particularly when people have been drinking at events. And again, it comes back to the culture. Then there needs to be a culture of no tolerance, like just zero tolerance for this behaviour, and kind of everybody who's involved needs to be calling out that behaviour and making sure it's not accepted.
Yeah, I mean, I think speakers do tend to work together as a team on those kind of things, and as a group of people, things are not tolerated, and that is the best way to support the women in your group. And I think it actually was the Scottish Summit. When you're thinking about your event activities, so if you're doing a full day event and you've got a social element to it, if you're doing a pub quiz or whatever it is you're doing, very early on as you're promoting it, these are the team leads that are competing, and it's, this is a woman leading this team and a man leading this team. Make it obvious through your advertising that it is fully inclusive, because there's nothing worse than just seeing it was exactly as you're saying, just images of men, or just the keynotes are all completely guys. There's so many talented keynote speakers out there that are women. you know, even that starts to set the tone before you've even got the rest of your speakers in. But I think there's also loads of ways that you can support, especially if you're a user group and you're not necessarily tied to an in-person event. Although, again, I think for Scottish Summit, because it was a long distance for me, the very first time I was at Scottish Summit, I was there virtually. So they allowed me to record my session and send it in, because they didn't want to miss out on a great session just because I couldn't get there or I was nervous about speaking. We do the same for Women in Tech events, you know, where we hold a week-long events of women speakers. It's more than okay for people to pre-record and then come along and answer questions, but it gets you past that nervousness of hearing your voice or being on camera or demoing live. I mean, Clarissa, that's just a nightmare that you have to get used to when you're presenting, right? So I think there are lots of things that you can do to support speakers, male or female.
I think as well, like, it's really important, because I can empathize that. I can understand that as a man it must feel sometimes very intimidating, like trying to talk about this sort of subject and have an opinion. But I think that, you know, we should be really welcoming of men's opinions on this topic and make sure that the Women in Tech conversation is not just with women, and that we're talking with men and involving men in the conversation. And I've seen on LinkedIn a lot more recently men, you know, being at the forefront of the conversation as well, which I think is really, really nice to see. And I think that's another way that people can support. And I know obviously it can be, it probably can feel like an absolute minefield because you're talking about experiences that aren't your own, but you can also talk about what you've seen, women you've worked with, ways that you would want the world to be different for, you know, any female relatives that you've got. So you still have, even if you're not a woman, you still have women in your life, you still have a perspective on the topic. And as we were saying, everyone having their own perspective and sharing that own perspective is, you know, what this whole movement is about. So yeah, I'd say that even though it could seem very scary, I would encourage men to also, you know, take part in the conversation.
Yeah, I must confess, I do have a bit of an issue of women-only events. I don't like that. That's not the way we go about this conversation. The whole point is inclusion, and it is being a part of a community, and all we want is to be a part of it. If you start running women-only or men-only events, you're part of the problem, not the solution, frankly.
Agreed.
Let's call it to a close. Thank you very much, Amber, for pointing that one out. That's a really nice comment. Thank you for your time there to type all of that in. Really appreciate it. Okay, lovely to see both of you, and thank you so much for your time. We will put this up on YouTube. We'll let you know when it's there so that you can let the world know. And thank you again for everything that you've shared with us, and we shall definitely have both of you back. Thank you for your time.
Thank you
very much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers, everyone.